Welcome to the Comfortable in Chaos Podcast. Strangle your demons and let's go.
Y'all need Jesus!
I can tell by your eyes that you've probably been crying forever. And the stars in the sky don't mean nothing to you, they're a mirror. I don't wanna talk about it, how you broke my heart. But if I stay here just a little bit longer, if I stay here, won't you listen to my heart? Oh, my heart. Welcome to the Comfortable in Chaos Podcast. I am your host, Eric Hellberg. And you know, we're like Einstein over here, man. We have no special talents. We're just passionately curious about all things pertaining to man. How in the hell did we get here? And where is it that we want to go? We're living a month and a day, and we are on the heels of Papa Joe's speech last night. Brilliantly written by his pundits. And the Democrats are already trying to get the disinterested voter to stay home by saying that Kamala's numbers have already equated Trump's. In fact, she may have superseded them, which is all a big, fat, effing lie. And we know that good old Kamala was selected, meaning the Democratic bigwigs, the oligarchs in the Democratic Party, the people like Mr. Vice and Mr. Soros, et al. That give the big bucks, that's who she got on the phone with that Sunday night, got there. Some cases conditional, in some cases unconditional support. And they left the representative body of the actual Democrats, by which their name is derived, out in the cold. So much so that black women are now going to X and saying, I'm not for Kamala. Even BLM has come out now and said we would have liked to have had a chance to vote on this woman instead of simply having her selected by the party brass and thrust upon us. That's pretty powerful now coming from BLM. So we can simply say that so far she has been selected, but not elected. And as my friend, I'll give his first name, Rudy, says, this woman is definitely the last slice of pizza that nobody wants, nobody. And then you hear about old Cheadle's been in the crosshairs, thus she had to step down because she filled the Secret Service with a bunch of kids, and they were all what they call DEI hires, diversity, equality. I don't know what the hell the I stands for. Individuality, I don't know. Pink hair wearing, skirt showing. I don't know what the hell that means. But for Kamala, we're just going to simply say she's a poster child for didn't earn it. And if you want to go one step further just to have a little bit of fun, Kamala may have been selected, but we know she got Willie Brown erected. Hello. All right, so guys, ladies, we know that Joe is still alive. Thank God we never wish ill upon anyone. But I tell you what, can you imagine what all has transpired in his life since last Wednesday, since we last saw hide or hair of our current president, now delegating the remainder of his task to the newly selected presumptive Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris. So as my intro song says, I don't wanna talk about it. But I guess we have to, man, right? And a woman like Kamala can definitely break your heart. A woman like Kamala can definitely break the collective heart of the American citizenry. And you know what, man? You can be brokenhearted by a woman, and you can be left brokenhearted by your country. And I will tell you what is so dangerous about this woman. She has never done one thing. She was always, and I will not even say gullible. She is idiotic in the sense of critical thinking, but in calculated self-gain, almost like a baby, she is willing to be used to get to where it will allow her to go. And in this case, the highest echelons of power, other than the people who control the echelons of power. And this woman will be willing to be used by them. And the dangerous situation that we currently find ourselves in, not only dangerous, I'm talking hanging at the edge of a cliff is where America is, hanging on by its fingernails. But she will allow them to do what they may with her while she sits and poses as a puppet. And so I guess for now, we have to all hear that fetid cackle in our heads as I sit here listening for the Kamala cackle under the illumination of my Catholic candlelight this evening, prepping this message. Yes, we know she was a diversity hire for Joe. And typically when we get into that realm and it gets into the subject of a black person, then we are simply talking, let's cut the diversity bullshit out. We're simply talking about having slave ancestry in your past somewhere. However, most of us are pretty far removed. And we have already gone back, and there's no need to qualify this, that we're all descendants of slaves. In some capacity, all of our knees have had to bow, certainly not to our risen Lord, but to some egregious group that held a position of power over us. But Kamala doesn't have that experience. Her father's Jamaican. Now, yes, Jamaica was a British colony. So for some time, it was under British colonial rule. And her mom is from India. And guess what? India was also a British colony subject to colonial rule. So if black Americans can extrapolate that experience, bring it into the fold, then maybe there may be some assimilation and likeness. But you know what? The reality is they have no tie. They can't relate. And she's going to be hell-bent on getting their support. So that leaves us with the donor class, the megalomania, psychopathic scumbags that are bankrolling this whole charade. And that who is calling the shots. And that is who we are all beholden to. And that is why America is on the precipice of literally a countrywide death. And Kamala will just be another, not unwitting, but fully compliant witness to our own destruction. You know what, man? Shit, man. I mean, effing A. What I should do, because I am going to tell you The class and grouping of people that are arriving in these positions of power and have been now for at least a generation, 2 generations, they are our worst of the worst. We know Trump is and was an aberration, but look at everyone else. What is it that makes the mental, emotional, and psychological construct of these deviants, these vermin, right? As Dr. Savage used to say, how are they made? Now, I'm not a licensed medical provider, but I believe I can provide a little analysis, let us say. I mean, I have chased many of these people, oftentimes under great peril. I have seen them at societal functions, and I'm talking the most elite upper crust layers of our society. I have studied them. I have seen how nuanced they can be. And I've been around the block or two. So I may just get into what comprises these people. What are some attributes that you can look for? And or similarly, what in God's green earth would possess these same people behind the scenes that have selected and not elected Kamala to want to control a nation, a populace, not for its betterment, but to subjugate it and gain power and money by their actions. It's all the same. It's all the same. Only the names will change. We're getting into Bon Jovi here, right? I mean, dear God, let us have an honorable Marine as our vice president. And we hope, after Trump, future president. And I'm glad that he brought someone in who is so youthful. That means we have time on our side. Time to repair, time to build. I mean, I would rather have an honorable Marine as president when it is his time than any Politico insider, any scum derived from the American oligarchy class, these career-obsessed politicians. Better yet, let's cite Thucydides. And who was Thucydides? An Athenian general and historian who recounted the Peloponnesian War between Sparta and Athens. And what did he say? Better an honest, honorable man than a self-serving thief. Where are these people? How about an example? I told you we're going to start debunking things that have been ingrained in our head. At the inception of the CIC podcast, we said we were debunking the commonly held beliefs of manhood, finding out who and what we really are. So let's do that right now for our collective conscience. Let's talk about Hugh Thompson. Who was Hugh Thompson? Well, he is the warrant officer. Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson, helicopter pilot who finally ended, and people pronounce it in different ways. I will pronounce it as My Lai. And for my Vietnam vets, that reeks and resonates in your mind over and over. Warrant Officer Thompson was flying a reconnaissance mission in his Huey. Ultimately, as he went back and forth, he started noticing large numbers of bodies everywhere in the village of My Lai. Everywhere he looked, according to what he said, he saw bodies. Infants, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds. Women, and very old men, no draft age people whatsoever. He recounted this at a My Lai conference at Tulane University in New Orleans in 1994. The way he stopped the massacre was that he ultimately landed his Huey between the soldiers and the retreating villagers that were being slaughtered, and then threatened to open fire on his own brothers, our U.S. service members, meaning Army personnel, if they continued their attacks. Ultimately, by the time good old Lieutenant William Calley, leading that portion of Charlie Company of the Army's 11th Brigade of the Americal Division, by the time they had done their damage, 504 people were dead. Among the victims were 182 women, 17 of them pregnant, some of them fetuses exposed, 173 children, including 56 infants. Lieutenant Calley personally would grab children, force them into a ditch, and mow them down. Countless women were raped who remained survivors. They killed the livestock, the livelihood of this village. They set the village ablaze. When one group of presumably dead Vietnamese showed life, he simply ordered a soldier to fire his M79 grenade launcher in between the mass of bodies. And so it went, and so it went. Thank God for Hugh Thompson. But where do we get these disturbed people that rise up to the top? Because now I am going to mention a man who at one time I had a great deal of admiration and respect for. He ended up being the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and then he later became Secretary of State under George W. Bush, and of course, chairman of the Joint Chiefs under Papa Bush, Herbert Walker. And you're saying, how the fuck did Colin Powell come into this picture? Well, as word of the massacre spread, the Army had to do something about it. And then the story was leaked to Seymour Hersh in 1969, who really broke it for the American populace to see. But did you know one of the Army's internal investigators was none other at that time than Major Colin Powell? And here's what he had to say about it. Although there may be isolated cases of mistreatment of civilians and POWs, this by no means reflects the general attitude throughout the Americal Division. And then old Colin went on to say, let's preface it. He said, regarding accusations of atrocities committed by American soldiers, Powell stated, in direct refutation of this portrayal is the fact that relations between Americal Division soldiers and the Vietnamese people are excellent, end of quote. A wholesale slaughter of innocent civilians in a village in the most despicable and heinous ways? And General Powell, you call our relations excellent? You are a perfect candidate for the people that I am talking about, who have hijacked this country on the way to the top and then support the malfeasance once they get there. Did you know after all that death and destruction, there were countless people involved who could have been brought up on charges, including the entirety of the chain of command? But the Army ultimately charged only 14 men. All were acquitted. except for Callie, the lieutenant, who of course said he was simply following orders. And then in 1971, Lieutenant Callie was given a life sentence for his role in directing the killings at My Lai. A lot of people saw him as a scapegoat. But did you know the only person held accountable for the 504 civilian Vietnamese, what do you want to call it, butchering, was then had his sentence reduced upon appeal from life to 20 years, and then later to 10 years, and ultimately he ended up being paroled 3 years later for the murder of 504 people. But as Colin Powell said that was an isolated incident of mistreatment, we now know that many other atrocities and mass killings went on, and also in countries all around the world thereafter under the blanket of democracy, which I has told you is no better than death and destruction. Let's add debilitation. There was another massacre of villagers at a place called Mai Key. There was a notorious military operation called Speedy Express. It killed thousands of Vietnamese civilians in the Mekong Delta. They were not combatants by any measure. But that was solely directed by a Major General, Julian Ewell. I guess he was already firmly implanted in the food chain. And instead of anything happening to him, he just got a cool nickname, the Butcher of the Delta. Yes, indeed. The cream does rise to the top. So until next time on the Comfortable in Chaos podcast, I bid you bon voyage, my burgeoning flock.
Until next time, like and subscribe to the Comfortable in Chaos